Welcome back, everyone, to Natural AF. I'm your host, Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And this show, we dive into what it means to be natural AF. From your head to your toes, from the inside to the outside, as above, so below. In the theme, following on that Hermetic principle, we have an amazing guest, the original Stephen A. Young, doctor of theoretical physics, a DJ, and many other things. But he's somebody that I think is...
And just an all-round legend, really.
Yeah, we had Steve down here for the Living Free Festival. He came in with, it was like a trio of guys, Mike Wilkerson, Mark Gober, and they traveled the world together. And
they were like the Three Musketeers, weren't they?
Yeah, it was pretty epic. We, made instant friends with them. Smart blokes, and it's just, the story is really cool. I like the fact he can speak on this level of theoretical physics, and he's written about it. His new book is out. We'll get into that.
Yeah, I love chatting to Steve because, first of all, he is literally just an all-round legend. Like, he's so down to earth. Like, hanging out with him, I mean, all of them really, it just felt like we just have known them forever. Like, so I love that he's super grounded, and the fact that he's literally got a background in science. He's the best person to debunk all this stuff because he's someone that actually went through all these years of university, learned all this stuff in mainstream science that everyone, wants to swear by. And he can see the flaws in it. And so, yeah, he's such a wealth of knowledge. I feel like we spoke on a lot of, we kind of went a lot of places, but I feel like we just scratched the surface, especially when you look into Steve's work. It goes really deep. And I love how he explains things. And even just listening back through, while we were editing, just listening back to how he explains the elements. And to me, that's such foundational knowledge. Once you learn something like that, it applies to literally everything.
Yeah.
And so this was just a fascinating conversation. I absolutely loved it.
Had you been exposed much to alchemy and all of that? Or was this something that I don't know, like through Rise Above the Herd, did they talk about any of these principles? Or?
Well, yeah, you hear the Hermetic principles thrown around a lot, but I think what's different in the way that Steve talks about it, again, I feel like Steve comes at it from like a very foundational place, and then you can apply it to so many different things. And he kind of touched on that in this interview about how there's like this inner alchemy that happens within us with, emotions and mentally and all of these things that we can alchemize within ourselves, but it also relates to the outer world, the physical. And I just love looking at it from that perspective because, as you said, as within, so without. And I think that is it's at the core of who we are and where we are, that I think once you fully understand that, it really does, you can apply it to everything.
Yeah. Well, I consider myself, after speaking to Stephen about this, I consider myself in the realm of alchemy. I won't say I'm an alchemist, but
I call him an alchemist. He's our resident alchemist. That's what I call him at home, because you make all the products for natural art form, and you definitely are an alchemist. I'm an alchemist in the kitchen, guys. That's my area of alchemy. I like to cook and make things taste good, and that's probably where it ends.
Yeah, but it's important when you do things passionately, and the more consciously aware you become of the elements that go into taking one thing and creating something, especially when it harmonizes with health in the body. You go down the road far enough, you start seeing the intersection with the energetic side of it, interacting with the ether, interacting with intention, and it's a test as well. When you interact with things on that spiritual level, your spirit's going to be tested. There's been times where I've made a batch of product that didn't turn out very well, and I've pitched a fit and got, disheartened a little bit and frustrated, and then brought it back together with calmness and then fixed the problem. And it's this part of transformation within yourself and transformation in the world. I love that whole thing and that concept of this. We really dive into this episode, and I think it's going to help. And the more you apply this to all areas of your life, because it does apply to all areas of your life, I believe that you can start to take back a bit more control and own certain parts of, whether it's your relationship, your business, your work, your internal dialogue, your internal world. Alchemy is one of the keys, a brilliant key for consciously being able to peel something apart without having to have the instruction manual. This is like the base elements of how everything works. So the more you understand this concept, the more you can enact changes and fix things.
Yeah, it's so universal. I think you just hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Love it. You're so wise, babe.
Well, I think about this stuff a lot. And, we'll get into that in the episode, how far back I've been interested in this from the military days. But anyways.
But before we get into the episode, first of all, we want to recap our weekend up on the Sunshine Coast. Yeah, we were up there for the Harmonic Folk Festival that was hosted by previous guests, Barney and Kata Miller, who collaborated with Remedy, Melissa Kupsch, we've had on the podcast, as a previous guest talking about all things homeopathy. And it was such an amazing event, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a good turnout. There's always amazing people that we meet there. We make friends at especially these very conscious events. But the amount of homeopaths that were there, people training to become homeopaths and health-oriented folks, having fun, doing barn dances. It was beautiful. I missed most of that because we were so busy, talking to people, and Alexa was doing amazing work with human design readings.
Yeah.
First time
I'd love to
doing them like in a stall
like that, in that setting. Yeah, it was I'd love to say that I got to enjoy the festival more, because I really didn't. It started at around 2 and people started showing up like before that, probably between 1:30 and 2, and by 3:30 I was completely booked out, and it was just back to back to back doing readings, which was amazing. I'm so grateful to everyone that came and had a reading. I connected with some amazing people, and then had a bit of a list of people I couldn't even fit in. So it was lots of fun. I felt very honored that they invited me to do that, because originally I inquired to book a stall for natural art form, and they asked me to come along and do human design readings. So it was an amazing experience. Absolutely loved it. And my only complaint is that I didn't get to enjoy more of the festival.
Yeah. And you were you're passing out flyers, you're taking emails for people that are interested in your workshop that you have coming up.
Yeah. So I'm doing a human design workshop coming up on Saturday, the 29th of November from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And I'm doing it online and in person. So if there's anyone local to the Northern Rivers, we're near Murwillumbah, and that's where it'll be. Or you can just jump online, join via Zoom, and wherever you are, it doesn't matter, and come along with your human design chart. We're going to be exploring human design in the context of relationships. So we're going to explore, it doesn't matter what relationship you want to look at. It can be your partner, it can be friends, it can be children, it can be business relationships. So yeah, we're really going to go deep. And I've just confirmed a really exciting announcement. I'm bringing on Julie Santel, who is another previous guest of ours. She's going to be coming on as a guest presenter to look at the nervous system, emotional regulation side of things. So we're going to go through everything in human design as it relates to relationships, how we relate to others. And then Julie's going to come in with some really practical tools as to how we can come back into alignment with ourselves when we get triggered in said relationships. So I'm super excited, and I'll pop the link in the show notes for people to book in and get more information.
Is she going to be there in person, or is she going to be
She'll be online. Yeah, she'll be zooming in from Victoria, because she would have loved to have come up, but she's just flat chat. She's so busy, that woman. She's always seeing clients, and it's hard for her to get away. So I'm glad that she could be here in that capacity, but who knows for the future? We really would love to do something in person again.
This.
Yeah.
So I don't hear too often when people are doing human design where they collaborate with someone doing the energetic work, but human design it's like an energetic art in a way. It's connected to the energy. You have energy centers. It's all about that, exploring where that comes from and how to best use it for your type, and then your partner and your children and all that. Yeah. So the nervous system makes sense to actually explore that in conjunction with this, especially in relationship. I think it's brilliant what you've done putting that together. Yeah, well, especially because there are certain energy centers in the body that are connected to particular parts of the body. So like the nervous system, especially, and like the adrenals and stuff, they relate to certain aspects within the centers. So it's really important to look at that stuff. And of course, emotional regulation, when you look at the emotional center, the solar plexus, 50% of the population have it defined.
from the lens of human design, and 50% have it undefined. That's a huge dynamic in the collective, and especially within relationship dynamics, that's almost always playing out. So yeah, especially because the nervous system, the adrenals, there are parts of the body that actually relate to specific energy centers, and we're going to be looking at that specifically in the context of relationship and how these different energy centers interact with each other, especially when one's defined and one's undefined. And so I love that Julie's coming in with really practical tools, because you can have the knowledge. I look at human design as bringing more conscious awareness to these different aspects of yourself. And then with Julie, what she's doing, this is going to be really practical tools that can get you back into your body, somatic exercises that can help you to regulate yourself so that you can come back into alignment with who you truly are.
Brilliant. That's going to be amazing. I think everyone that goes or attends that is going to get a lot out of it. And these will put some tools in your hands to help you thrive in your relationships. Now, also to help you thrive, we want to offer a 10% off discount to anybody that wants to order anything from Natural Art Form to help you become more resilient, whether you're an athlete, whether you've just been injured, you have something that's going to help you feed your body's repair processes with Alleviate. And also our deodorant is designed to add magnesium to your daily use on your body, and magnesium fits right in with this nervous system work, but your body uses it to buffer itself against stress and heat and depletion and all that. But if you are taking in magnesium, you're just able to draw on that more. You're not feeling as tired. You know, it helps with brain fog. There's all kinds of things magnesium is very critical for. So I put that into the deodorant. It also just so happens that it helps reverse body odor, helps actually kill the bacteria that makes you stink. So, you know, everything has a purpose here with Natural Art Form. So if you'd like to try any of these products, we have a 10% off discount for all of our listeners. And that's just a thank you for showing up and listening to the show and showing up for yourself and taking care of your health. And that discount is Natural AF 10. And that's good as many times as you want to use it. Go to naturalartform.com and plug it in at checkout. Also sign up for our monthly newsletter. That's where you'll find our dates where we're going to be at the markets. If you're driving through this part of Australia, we'd love to see you there. Keep tabs on where we're at through that email, and also be updated on whenever we have other special sales, discounts, or new product announcements.
Well, before we get into the episode, just a little disclaimer from me. We had to record this interview late just because of the time difference. Steve's over in Scotland, we're in Australia, so we had to do his morning, our evening. I was a little brain dead. I've edited it a little bit so I don't sound so retarded, but I was very tired, and especially speaking to Steve, who's so highly intelligent, I could not string a sentence together, so my apologies in advance.
Yeah, it's an easy listen though, so don't get intimidated by him being a theoretical physicist. He's also been a DJ primarily for the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's an easy guy to listen to, and yeah, you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this interview. He's just so full of wisdom, and I think it's a lot of really practical stuff that you'll be like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Love it. Well, let's get into it.
Let's do it. Stephen A. Young is an author, musician, and natural philosopher recognized for his work under the music alias Hedflux, and is the author of A Fool's Wisdom, Science, Conspiracies, and the Secret Art of Alchemy. With a background in theoretical physics, holding both a Master of Science and a PhD, Stephen has carved an eclectic career at the crossroads of science, spirituality, and music. Now based in Scotland with his wife and 3 children, Stephen continues to expand his work at the intersection of science and spirituality, exploring alchemical philosophy and the transformative power of sound and music.
All right, well, we have with us today the legendary Steve Young, Doctor of Sound. I don't know, we had so much fun with you at the festival. Played an epic set, and then melted everyone's brains with the mind gravy from your presentation.
Yes,
and
you're a
lot
jack
to
of
cram
many
into.
trades.
Yeah, and you only had like, what is a 45-minute presentation time or whatever. So if anything you want to elaborate on here, like, you have as much time as you want to hang out with us. But welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. That was a wonderful time in Australia. Actually, I would say the highlight of the year. In fact, it was just a magical trip from start to finish.
Awesome.
Yeah, really
It was
stuck. I
so
got a
cool,
Living
man.
Free hoodie back there. I don't know if you can see it just in the background there. Yeah, just I've been wearing that every day since I got back.
Love
Amazing.
it. I have been too. Can I just say, like, not just because I love the Living Free, but those jumpers, that's like the most comfortable hoodie I've ever bought. I love it.
Yeah, it's super comfortable, good material, looks great, and full of good memories from my week? Yeah, I had a week in Australia, so yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Was
It
that
was
your
cool
first
having
time
you.
here, Steve?
No, so actually, in my previous life as a superstar DJ, I used to go to Australia quite a lot, like once a year from 2011 through till 2017. I went out every year and did a tour, and I would usually play maybe like 5 or 6 shows over like 2 or 3 week period. So I
Cool.
did that every year for I think 7 years. Yeah,
Wow. So you're basically an adopted Aussie then.
yeah, I mean, I had the best time every time, but this
Yeah.
time, this time kind of took the biscuit. I mean, I'm older now, I don't really want to be just touring around raves and stuff like that. I'm looking for a bit more meaning in my life, and Living Free was the perfect place for that. It had just had the perfect balance of, interesting and important talks and speakers, and great music. Like in between all the speakers, there was a great balance of like sort of talks then music, and not to mention just in the wonderful magical environment of the Australian bush. Yeah, it was
Yes.
really well done. Absolutely buzzing from it, like wholeheartedly. One of the best experiences I've ever had. Yeah, loved it.
Yeah,
Incredible.
we have this amazing tribe here. So when I did an exploratory trip out here in August 2023, and just meeting Alexa and her mom and her whole family, and then this particular area that you got to come to, outside of Mowullumba, this Stoker sighting crew. It's there's interesting stuff here. There's people that I think have been attracted to this area, like on a spiritual path. Some from all over the world, some from other places in Australia, and then like every little thing, like even our friend that had the organic tobacco from Bali or whatever that I went around and scrounged that for you before your set, and I was like, yeah, like we're doing there's so many things that we just like we put this intention into, and everybody has their little specialty and bring something really special to the table here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was awesome, and I met so many great people I've been in contact with since. And there's even some talk I might come out next year, so fingers crossed.
All right. That
Yay.
would be
That's
epic.
awesome. Well, I love that you already kind of mentioned like your past life and where you are now. So we always like to open it up with you sharing a little bit of your personal journey, because as most people know, your book, A Fool's Wisdom, which I didn't realize only came out not that long ago. The way that everyone was talking about it, I thought this was like this cult classic that came out 20 years ago and everyone knew of it. But it's actually fairly recent. So, yeah, why don't you just share with our audience a little bit of your journey and sort of, where you started off and then what led you to, come to write the book and start to discover the things that are in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear it's a cult classic. Yeah, it's a little under 2 years old at this point.
Yeah.
It was actually April Fool's Day of 2024 when I released it. I sort of pressured myself to get it out on Fool's Day to, Fool's Wisdom and all that.
Yeah,
It maybe
I love
came
it.
out a little bit too early. There was still quite a few typos and stuff in the first edition, so I tightened it up a bit and released a second edition in December. But yeah, before I wrote the book, I was all about music. Publicly, you could say that's how I became known through my music project, Hedflux. I started actually 20 years ago, so I'm currently just preparing all my music. I'm gathering all my music together. Everything I've ever done in the last 20 years is the Hedflux 20-year legacy collection, right? Over 100 tunes and 15 hours worth of DJ mixes. So it's been kind of nice going through all that and just being like, wow, I did that. And, there's something about creativity. At the time I was making all these tunes, I wasn't making much money or any money. I mean, most of the times I was giving the music away for free. And you're making a lot of sacrifice at the time to do all this. But now that I'm here 20 years later and seeing how like the value of all these tunes like taken together, the whole body of work taken together is really, you know, awesome. I'm actually quite impressed with myself. I'm like, damn.
No, it's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah,
You know
that's
that.
incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's cool. So it's kind of come round a bit with Hedflux. As say 20 years on, I'm not very active with it anymore, though I do still have some new music that I haven't released yet. But I'm not out gigging so much anymore. And obviously, it all kind of came down in 2020 when the whole world shut down. At that point, I'd been doing Hedflux for 10 years full time. So I'd been playing all over the world, as I say, over 100 tunes produced. And I was kind of, coming to a point with it anyway, where I was thinking I need something else now. I don't want to be just going from rave to rave for the rest of my life, right? I got 3 kids. It's like I need some other way of making money. And so 2020 obviously forced us all to, stop and reevaluate things. And at this point, my scientific training kind of came back a bit. So I hadn't completely given up on science while I was doing music. So as you know, my background in science, theoretical physics, master's and PhD. And but after university, I kind of just left it and went on. I did work for 5 years in the corporate world, and then I quit my job and did Hedflux full time for 10 years. But yeah, so coming back round to that, my scientific training really started to kick in hard during the whole COVID debacle, because, of course, everything that was happening was being done in the name of science. And so I, began researching what was going on, looking for answers, looking for evidence of the claims that were being made on the news and all this. And, I very quickly became highly skeptical of the whole entire thing, the whole entire story. All the measures, everything. So it was then, as you know, we were then sort of persecuted for like 2-3 years. If you didn't go along with this nonsense, you were, increasingly sort of threatened and kicked out of society and all that. So while that was going on, I thought, I have to really look at my scientific training now, because I've realized that much of physics is wrong or misleading. Much of medicine is wrong or misleading. I was like, I really need to get a grip on this. What is real when it comes to science and what is false? And so I joined up with some other scientists during that time, during the lockdowns and that. I was like meeting online with some other, great minds who were also in the same boat. And they're, ex-academics, ex-doctors and so on, who are actually reviewing everything they were taught, and they're seeing that a lot of it is bullshit. And so we were all together in this. There's a lot of us all going through this, and so through talking to the other scientists in different fields and working all this out, I got a picture of the scale of the scientific deception, and I thought I need to write a book about this. So that's where this came from. So really, it's a book of 2 halves. The first half of the book goes into modern science and the various problems with it, the deceptions, how it's used against us and so on, and really tackles some of the biggest issues in science. And then in the second half, I talk about alchemy, which is an ancient science, an ancient practice, a spiritual science, which in my view explains everything perfectly well without any need for modern science whatsoever. So it's really an effort to separate what's real and what's useful from what is, just illusory or pseudoscience.
Yeah. Is there a point for you that was like a crisis with any of this, where you would put all this time and energy and effort into, obtaining the degree, and there comes with that, some prestige or some, something to put on your wall? Or were you just kind of detached from, the PhD and you're just doing your own thing?
Yeah, I mean, after the PhD, I was unsure about when to use my title and when not. Like I didn't like, even though I have the right to put doctor before my name, I could always do that if I want to, legitimately call myself a doctor. but I wasn't using it a lot. And the reason was because I kind of knew that nuclear physics was actually no use to anybody, right? It's like if you put doctor before your name, there's people expect you be able to help them, right? If you have a problem, like a health problem or something. And I put doctor before my name and people want help. I'm like, well, I only know about nuclear physics, which is actually no help to anybody.
That would make a great video. It's like on the airplane, somebody's having a heart attack. Is there a doctor on the plane? You're like, technically, yeah, I'm a doctor.
Yeah,
like, have you thought about have you thought about dark matter before?
Yeah, I didn't want anything like that to happen. You know, is there a doctor on the plane? Yes. Can you help? No.
No.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you're not one of those people, Stephen. You used your discretion as to how and when you use it, because I was actually, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was in a training course that I'm doing. So the training course is just a bunch of different people from all over the world just learning something. And someone introduced themselves but they put the PhD in front of their name. And I remember thinking, that's so unnecessary. Like, your PhD doesn't matter here.
And it goes behind it, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah, it's meant to go at the end. Yeah, it was bizarre.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're not one of those people.
No, so I do sort of, sometimes I'm like, should I use it? Shouldn't I use it? I mean, like, I didn't use it on the cover of my book, for example, which, a lot of people would have thought that was a good opportunity to use it. But I put it on the back of the book, right? Because it's like, it's sort of secondary information. I just wanted my name on the front. But, I have, though, as I started writing this book, I started to actually take my title more seriously. So, we think of doctors, right? We think of the guys working at the surgery, prescribing drugs or doing surgeries and that kind of thing. But doctor, the word actually comes from Latin docere, which means to teach. So really a doctor is one who has a sufficient knowledge of a subject to be able to teach it. So I am a doctor, I am a real doctor in that sense. And, in the PhD, well, it's philosophy doctorate. And philosophy means love of wisdom, philosophia, love of wisdom. So, when I realized this, and again, this was like 5 years ago, I didn't even realize that, when I was doing the PhD, but when I started looking in the definitions of the words, I realized, well, I do love wisdom. Actually, I've been seeking wisdom, and now I'm trying to teach people wisdom. So a doctor is to teach, a philosopher is one who loves wisdom. So I actually started to take my title seriously, and I thought, well, this is actually what a doctor or a PhD should be doing, is writing books to help people understand what is true and what is false. So I've kind of taken it on board. I've taken it more to heart now, and because I can't escape it. These were my formative years. Like from age 16 through to 25, I was doing quantum physics the whole freaking time. You can't shake that off. So. Even though I'm skeptical about the claims of quantum physics now, I did actually receive a very rigorous scientific training, because they, the claims may not apply to reality, but what they do is they create kind of a sandbox, like a theoretical sandbox. So you have some assumptions that you make, and then you do science within the framework of those assumptions. And it's still very rigorous science, and it's very complex, and it takes a long time to do stuff and break stuff down and figure out and solve equations and all that. So it's a very rigorous scientific training, but it doesn't apply to reality. It's just because it's all just in a theoretical sandbox. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of like if somebody wanted to take the TV show Star Trek and create like an economist, and they wanted to create an economic model of the world of Star Trek. You could do that, and you could do that very, very in fine detail. It just wouldn't matter because it's not real.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is something in your training that does apply to reality, or does it? Like the idea of quantum physics. I know that's really, it's so hot right now, like on Zoolander. But where do you go with that? Like, where are you currently on the quantum physics and quantum anything these days?
Yeah, I mean, I'm highly skeptical, but I did a presentation on YouTube back in April about quantum physics, and tried to debunk it as fairly as I possibly could, because here's the thing: quantum physics is not a whole new type of physics. It's actually based on classical physics, And so it has sort of classical physics within it. And so a lot of things in quantum physics are actually useful in the sense that it's useful mathematics. So like the science of vibration and harmony, like harmonic science, because atoms and molecules and stuff like that are modeled as harmonic structures, almost like musical chords, like different waveforms added together. And so there is some useful mathematics within it, but there's a philosophical component, like a belief system behind quantum physics, which I don't believe in. And there's theoretical claims, things that they say that happen or happen in nature, or things they've discovered, which are actually just bunk. They didn't discover them. They don't happen. They just made them up. They're like thought experiments, or they call them Gedanken experiments, which is basically an experiment you do in your head instead of actually in the real world, right? And quantum physics is full of those, absolutely full of them. And it's suspicious, like how unclear they are about what experiments are real and what experiments were just in people's minds. You know, they sort of muddy the waters with that. So people talk about quantum experiments as if they're real things that people did, but often they're just, tricks of the mind.
Yeah. I remember reading
So there's a lot of stuff mixed up in there, and people quantum physics had a lot of criticism over the years for not being a true science, or not being a hard science, because it is so highly theoretical and counterintuitive and untested in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, because the first time I really came across quantum physics was back in, I would say around probably a decade ago, when I got into Joe Dispenza's stuff. I bought one of his books and read that. And I was kind of like at first, and again, I hated science at school. Ended up going on to study a Bachelor of Health Science because I did holistic nutrition. But I guess in the context of what Joe Dispenza is all about and what he, teaches, it makes a lot of things make sense. And even one of the modalities I work with now, they have pretty concrete scientific evidence for, like, they do brain scans to show like how the processes actually work. So there's stuff that's like they can prove through the brain scans, but then there's a lot of stuff that's explained through the quantum model as well. And so I think when it comes to these things that are more intangible, I think the quantum explanation comes in like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But I think you're right. That's what I struggled to kind of wrap my head around it at first, and just thinking like, oh, because I'm not really science minded. But I think what you're saying, that's kind of why, because it is just theoretical. So it's like you can put the theory to, in the context of, for example, the Joe Dispenza book, and you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But outside of that, I was kind of like, I don't get how this works. So I think the way that we're moving towards now is that we're looking at energy. Everything is energy. And so the quantum model kind of speaks to that. But can you explain why it doesn't fully explain the energetics of things, but what within quantum physics and the way they explain things does sort of speak to the energetics?
Yeah. Yeah, well, a good example is one of the people's favorites in quantum theory is entanglement. Mm-hmm. You've heard about this, entanglement. Everyone loves that. I was super excited by it when I was at uni. And okay, they talk about the idea that a particle, when two particles, when they're like together and then they go apart, they're entangled with each other. So that if you take them like hundreds of miles apart and you do a measurement on one, it will affect the behavior of the other one. Like by looking at one, you affect the other one, right? That's the idea with entanglement. Now, the problem is, where's the particles? Right? You're talking about particles, but where are they, right? No one's ever seen one. No one's ever isolated. It's the same problem with virus, right? No one's ever isolated an electron, like no one's ever isolated a virus. You're talking about hypothetical objects here. And same with photons, again, hypothetical objects. So, but entanglement itself, well, that is a real thing, but it applies to human beings, right? Not to particles. So human beings get entangled with each other. If you think about, like, when you're walking down the street and there's all these people going past you, right? And you don't say hello to anybody, you don't make eye contact with anybody, right? You're just walking about, right? You're not getting entangled. But if you stop and you start speaking with someone, you start making eye contact, you start sharing information with each other, now you're entangled, right? When you go apart your separate ways, like things that happen to you, you'll be thinking of that person, they'll be thinking of you. There's an entanglement of life force energy, which has happened as a result of the interaction between the two people. And so what I found is a lot of what quantum physics says about particles is actually stuff that applies to people. In some ways, they've replaced people with particles, which are these really abstract, tiny little things that, in my view, don't even exist. So
I was going to say, but that's all we are, Steve. We're just a bunch of particles, just a clump of cells that came to be humans, according to the mainstream narrative.
So, Steve, are you talking about how, like, you'll think of somebody and then they'll call you, like, within a second or whatever? Like, if that's happened to people, is that kind of what you're talking about as well? Like, that's a form of entanglement, like this connection that's not physical?
Yes, yeah, and I think that that particular case of like when someone's calling you and you think of them just before they do it, you know, that'll be someone that you know, right? It's not going to happen with someone that you don't know. If someone just calling you randomly, you're not going to be like, oh, that person, you know, because you have no entanglement with them, you have no previous interaction or like energetic exchange with them. So, yeah, so I think we do become entangled with people. I mean, if you think in an extreme case, like a sexual partner, for example, so when two people engage sexually, you know, they become highly entangled, right? For the rest of their life, it's like there's karmic connections and, you know, just all sorts that come out of there, you know. So, so I guess what I'm just trying to say is like some of these quantum ideas and quantum processes, they apply to the human mind, even if they've never been proven to apply to these little particles that they talk about. So, you know, there is some,
that makes sense.
There's layers of truth in there and there's some useful things to think about. But you know, if, you know, to explain something in terms of electrons is just not a sufficient explanation, you know, like imagine somebody, you know, you're having an argument with somebody, like, why did you say this to me? And you're like, well, the electrons in my brain were, you know, doing this and that. It's like, no, you can't explain things in terms of particles that no one's ever seen, or, you know, so it's totally unsatisfactory scientifically. And that's why they work essentially in isolation in academia. They don't make anything, don't create anything, don't solve any problems. They just sit there in their sandbox doing these quantum calculations and running models on computers or whatever. But nothing is ever produced. Nothing good ever happens, right? It's
I wonder if
fruitless.
that's just a way that they take the minds, like, one, smart individuals, people with a lot of potential and work ethic. So obviously it took a lot of work for you to get to the PhD and to pass all the tests and to write all the theses and all the things you had to do to get there. It's like they take that potential and they just funnel it or like aim it into a void and just send you off on this goose chase. And maybe there's an intention, like when you first started doing it, like I'm sure you were very curious and you still are. And your curiosity has led to some really, really interesting things that are in your book and in the videos that you make. And I think that's what they're trying to keep the really bright minds out of. Because there's guys like Isaac Newton. He wrote more about the esoteric stuff than he did about calculus or gravity or anything else, like by like triple the amount. And side note, I thought it was interesting. I found out through reading a book about this that allegedly the person who owns all that now, or owned it, I don't know if he's still alive, is the Keynesian guy, the guy who started Keynesian economics. For some reason, he had a strong interest in esoteric stuff, and he bought that whole trunk of Isaac Newton's esoteric works when they put it up for auction. So,
wow, yeah, I didn't know that. I wondered where that had got to. Yeah, I've not read it. I mean, it's apparently over 1 million words he wrote on the subject of alchemy. Although, from what I understand, he wasn't actually a good alchemist. He didn't get it. I've seen some quotes from Newton that indicate to me that he didn't understand the fundamentals of alchemy at all, but he was obsessed with it. And yeah, so he was very interested in it, but he's not considered a great alchemist in the history of alchemy, right? He's like, obviously, he's been put up as the the first of the rational-minded scientists or whatever. But that's a psyop as well. He wasn't rational-minded, like he's put up like this pinnacle of rationality. He believed in spirit. He believed in essentially ether. He said that there's space is filled with a vivifying spirit that all life depends on, right? So, he did have spiritual inclinations, even though he's used as a symbol of materialist science, sometimes like the way figures are used in history are not actually a reflection of who they actually were. And I think that is the case with Newton. But yeah, you're spot on when you said that it seems like the universities are just taking the brightest minds and channeling all that energy into the void. That is exactly how I felt after it all. And, you got so much hope. You think what you're doing is so important, so like high-minded, and, you're going to like help the future of humanity or whatever. And then you're just basically stuck in a dusty office running computer simulations for nothing, And I don't know. Well, I mean, the way things are in this country now, it does seem like just for a long time they've been suppressing people. It's not a meritocracy, right? They don't want people to be the brightest and best they can be and go on to make big changes. They're actually suppressing that. They want you to be controlled. They want you to do what they're told. They want you on benefits. It's just, it's frustrating. But it is the way it is. But
Harrison, was it that short story, Harrison Bergeron, right? Where they take the most athletic and they put the weights on them to slow them down. They make the beautiful people make themselves ugly, or now we're seeing them elevating, obesity and things like that, and corrupting the idea of body positivity, turning it into something that's unhealthy. So the topic of alchemy, for those that aren't familiar with it, what's a simple way to describe what alchemy is, and why is it useful, and why do they lead people away from it?
Well, I like to use the term the science of transformation because it is a science and it is primarily concerned with transformation, and that is the changing of materials, or the transmutation, taking some starting material and working it into a perfected final state. So people usually think of alchemy, they think of lead into gold. And I was taught that at school, and that was about all I was taught about alchemy. They were just these kind of crazy old scientists who tried to make gold from lead. But actually, just a little bit of digging will show that this idea of lead into gold is not all about making metal or making money. It's about transformation. In fact, transformation of yourself. It's transformation of your leaden personality into your most refined and perfected version of yourself. So it's a lot to do with personal development, but it also ties into chemistry, creativity, anything where you're doing some developmental work from a lower state to a higher state of perfection. So I found it just applies to everything in life, and that's kind of what I've been doing, is trying to show people, this isn't some evil witchcraft, which something like the church and stuff like that will say, like alchemy is witchcraft. And then you have on the science side, they'll say that it's pseudoscience and misguided, whatever. So you have actually both science and religion agreeing on something. they both don't like alchemy, right? It's like usually they're opposites on everything, but when it comes to alchemy, they're like, no, we don't like that. And then when I start looking into it, I understand why. It's because alchemy is, in a way, it's like the science of religion, because it's science, but it hasn't rejected God, it hasn't rejected spirit, it hasn't rejected the human soul. God, spirit, and the soul are contained within the scientific formulation of alchemy. So if you're an awakening materialist, right? If you're someone like a lot of us, you're just brought up as an atheist or a materialist or whatever. You have some spiritual experiences. Now your science can't explain your life. You're left thinking, oh, now you're totally lost. Like nothing makes sense. That what I was taught no longer explains my life experience. Well, if you come to alchemy, you'll start to feel better and be like, oh, okay, no, there is actually a spiritual science that makes sense and makes sense of the experiences of my life and so on. So yeah, I've been trying to show people how alchemy applies to everything and how it's actually really useful and very much down to earth and practical, as well as being spiritually uplifting and all these other things.
Yeah, I've got to say, I love the way you speak about alchemy, Steve, because I only caught, I think, the last 10 or 15 minutes of your talk at the festival. And I remember you like just giving a really basic list of like different types of alchemy. And it was like, making tea and coffee and, just like literally things in your everyday life. And it really made me realize, I was like, yeah, alchemy really is part of everything. But I think because it is sort of suppressed, we don't see it that way. And I think it very much does rely on this life force, creative energy that we as humans have. And so, as we know, there is a concerted effort to dim that life force, creative energy in us, or to siphon it into, things that the quote unquote ruling class want us to do, or things that they want to come into effect because they don't have that, they don't possess the creative energy that we have. And so do you think that there's a part of that, like this suppression of alchemy and what they've done to, I guess maybe like demonize it in these, scientific religious circles, because of that, like wanting to sort of dim our light, so to speak?
I think so. I mean, when you read the earlier alchemy books, like there's a lot of stuff from like the 16th, 17th century and so on, and they're beautifully written books, but they are somewhat cryptic, and they usually begin with a warning that you shouldn't talk about alchemy with regular folk, right? When it's like a secretive practice, but in those days, I mean, it was a different climate altogether in terms of like the religious authorities and all that kind of stuff. So it was dangerous in those days to talk about this kind of stuff out in the open. And so when I first started reading about it, I was in two minds. I'm like, should I talk about this or shouldn't I? It seems like it's very secretive. But then I started just finding more and more resources online, and I thought, you know what? This isn't a secret anymore. Like clearly. Like, I never saw any evidence of alchemy being censored on the internet. Like, never. Not a single post or book or video or anything about alchemy I've ever seen censored. But you make a post about COVID, you get censored. You make a post about vaccines, you get, make a post even about flat Earth, right? You could get censored. But posts about alchemy, not censored. So I sort of thought, well, if the elites were trying to... on one hand, they are hiding it from us by not including it in our education or in our media landscape. It's not put out there as a thing. It's just ignored. But there's all these books, all these resources, all these videos all over the place. If you just dig a little bit beneath the surface, you'll find it all. And none of it is censored. It's all just right there. And, I thought just with the way things are with the internet, I feel like this is like a new age of humanity where it's like a post secrets, it's like all the stuff that was kind of hidden in the libraries and vaults of history is coming to the surface now. And I just felt like that now is the time. It's not to be hidden and secretive anymore. We need to talk about this because everyone's just believing a load of nonsense science, and they need to know what the real, true, natural science is. So I took a bit of a risk. I thought I'll just start speaking about it and see what happens. I didn't know if maybe some like guild of alchemists would come after me and try to silence me or something, but it's never happened. No, so I think it's safe to talk about it.
There's people that might be surprised, like Isaac Newton. I was shocked when I found out that he was really into it, and I did some deep dives early on. There's one, Marie Curie, whether or not she actually existed. She's supposedly the progenitor of the whole radiation thing. And she was a part of something called I think it was called the Invisible College, or they may have had another name for it, like the Flying College or something. And I think it was one of the first, like before women were allowed in other universities, they were allowed in these esoteric groups. And from what I could tell, if she was a real person, she was a part of this. And then she was also buried in the Pantheon, which I thought was interesting, in France. So they definitely esteem these people. And Marie Curie, I think there's somebody else that made a video about her encoding the idea of mercury. But this stuff is all very fascinating to me. So we have mercury, and then on the physical side, there's like mercury poisoning. But on the esoteric alchemy side, mercury seems to be a very important concept, including when they do a lot of these psyops and things like that. They leverage numerically mercury or astrology and all this stuff. So does astrology and these symbols like mercury and all these philosophical ideas, is that what you teach or what you kind of explore with alchemy? Is it do you get into like astrology and a lot of that stuff as well?
Yes, yeah. Alchemy and astrology are intimately linked through through the four elements, because each of the astrological signs have a elemental correspondence. It's like Aries is fire and so on. So when I look at astrology, I do it from an alchemical perspective, and I for example, I do birth chart readings for people occasionally. And I only use the 7 planets, not the 10. So I throw out Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. There's not a single ancient alchemical or old alchemical drawing or anything with those planets in them, right? It's 12 signs, 7 planets, right? That's what we see in the sky. But these ones, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they were added later. And, I think they actually just kind of complicate astrology, and I'm not sure how much value they actually add having them in their chart. I don't even know whether they exist, honestly. I mean, apparently you can see Uranus and Neptune faintly with a really powerful telescope. You can see like a tiny little blue dot in the sky or something, but they're below the threshold of visibility. So in astrology then, so the visible planets, the lights that you can actually see with your eyes, are associated with your consciousness, and then anything that's below that you can't see would be subconscious. So yeah, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, even if they do exist, you're talking about subconscious influences, and they also have a longer period than a human lifespan. So they're like generational changes rather than personal. I think they call them the transpersonal planets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So astrology and alchemy, intimately linked. It's like as above, so below. Like alchemy, the science of below, like the earth realm, and then astrology, the science of the celestial, and they sort of mirror each other in a way.
Yeah, I love that. So you mentioned as above, so below. Do you have a little bit of insight onto where that comes out, like the Hermetic principles, and where does that originate?
Yeah, so that comes from Hermes Trismegistus, who that name is probably the most referenced name in all alchemical literature. You once you start looking, you won't find a book that doesn't mention his name several times. I mean, so the reason is because it all goes back to, there's the Corpus Hermeticum, which is a book allegedly written by Hermes Trismegistus, and this tablet called the Emerald Tablet, which is a green tablet that was allegedly found in Egypt and had a bunch of symbols engraved on it, which contained all the teachings of alchemy, like condensed into a single page. And so a number of alchemists have translated that over the years, including Isaac Newton. Actually, he did a translation of the Emerald Tablet. So there's several, I don't know, maybe like 15 or 20 different translations people have done of the Emerald Tablet. And it can sometimes be a bit cryptic, a bit hard to wrap your head around. I did one myself recently, so I got using the AI. I created a chatbot to adopt the personality of Hermes Trismegistus. So I trained the AI on all the Hermetic literature, all the alchemical texts, plus my own book, and got it to adopt the personality of Hermes. And then I asked it to reinterpret the Emerald Tablet for the modern age. And
Oh,
so I
that's
actually
cool.
have a new interpretation of the Emerald Tablet, and it's really good. It really makes a lot of sense. It's well written. It's better than the old ones. Like so.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
So I
have you
joined.
released that?
Yeah, it was in a presentation I released on YouTube 2 weeks ago called Introduction
sweet.
to Alchemy. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. We'll have to check that out. We might actually even link that in the show notes.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So Hermes Trismegistus. So in that Emerald Tablet, he coined the phrase "as above, so below." That which unfolds above corresponds to that which manifests below, and it's the idea that there is these two sort of levels to the universe. We have a celestial, a heavenly realm, and an earthly realm. And there's a correspondence, like things that happen up there reflect on what happens down here, but it also goes the other way. So things we do down here rise up and affect what goes on up there. There's this kind of like back and forth between the celestial and the earthly realms. And he says, with this knowledge alone, you can accomplish miracles, right? So just from that one understanding, as above, so below, as below, so above, you can work miracles. Now, the reason is because, well, I mean, it's very, very deep, but if you look at the practice of ritual and ceremony, okay, which was called theurgy, like Theurgy, theurgy. And again, this is another field of study that is completely absent from school or university training, and, it's like occulted and you never hear about it. But it's the art of ritual and ceremony. And again, this is kind of demonized as well. I mean, what do you think of when you hear the word ritual, right? You probably think of like guys in hoods with blood and, pentagrams and everything, doing like evil, like devil stuff, right? But of course not. Ritual doesn't have to be evil, right? Rituals can be beautiful. And, I've taken part in many beautiful rituals and ceremonies in the shamanic practice and so on. But when you do a ritual down below, right, it's like you're sending information up, right? So the rituals, the theurgy is like the connection between alchemy and astrology, right? You do these rituals, that energy then goes up and then comes back down, and it's like this sort of cycle, So this is why ritual and ceremony is so important. But again, it's another just aspect of life that we've not been taught about, and it's sorely absent from modern life, I think.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot to say about the absence of that. And also the rituals that we do partake in and what they actually mean. I got sent a video recently about birthdays, how we celebrate birthdays now, with the singing of the song and the making a wish, like not telling anyone your wish, and how that's actually like, it's like whatever you're wishing for is not going to come true because you're not even speaking it. Like especially in human design, the throat center is the manifestation center. And I think that says a lot for, how much power our words have. And there's all these things around like this birthday ritual that we've become so accustomed to that are actually quite inverted. And so I think it's really important to look at the rituals and the ceremonies we partake in and the ones that we don't, because I think what comes to mind for me with that in particular too is like rites of passage. And I think we've really lost that with, especially when we talk about the development of men and women and, from boy going to man and from girl going to woman. And I think that's like a huge piece. I think there's a lot that we see in our modern society that I think we've lost because we don't have that initiation into adulthood, or womanhood or manhood, and all of that. Like when you look at the tribal and traditional cultures, there was ceremony and ritual around those rites of passage, and I just think it has a lot to say for where we're currently at in today's society.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got 3 children. My eldest is 15, so she's kind of getting to that age, and I don't know what the right thing to do is in terms of coming of age, rites of passage, and so on. They're completely missing from modern life. So yeah, this is something I would like for my kids to have some kind of rite of passage into adulthood, but I don't know exactly what that's going to be just yet.
Yeah.
That's something I think about as well. Particularly for men, I think it's a physical challenge of some sort, a skills test, things like that. And in fact, this morning I had, for some reason I was just prompted. I was looking into my lineage as far as going back on the Navajo side. And then in that region of New Mexico, and what happened, I actually went pretty deep, and I found they had these rituals that the Spanish came in and tried to outlaw, and they filled in. So they had these holes, and the holes in the ground were designed to basically stand in as like a model of the earth. And it's round, and it has a dome, has a cover, and then there's a ladder that goes through the center hole into the middle of this hole. And then in the bottom is another hole that they put a fire inside this thing. So you go in, and you can imagine it's dark. And there's things hanging from the ceiling. There's like corn, probably some kind of herbs. And that will be introduced into the fire. And then inside, I'm sure there's drums and there's chants. And the tradition that's part of this information that's encoded in both the physical structure and the ceremony was their tradition that they, as a people, going back, the Anasazi before them, and this is like in the Pueblo people and the Navajo, but they believe that they came out of the earth from the third world. And then there's first world, second world, third world, and then we're on the fourth world, like we're in the fourth plane. But when you were talking about the as above, so below, my mind, because I get a little creative, and my mind is like, what does below mean, though? Because I'm thinking that this physical plane is below the celestics, but there's below us, even into the earth, and there's traditions like this that I found from these native peoples that it's almost like the hollow earth idea, where they came out of the earth from another place. And then, who knows where that goes, but the ceremony, the idea of the ceremony, I was like, I'm trying to find information, like, why were they doing this? Because we've done what you could say is ceremony with things like the family constellation and things like that. I think are very powerful, and we kind of understand the meaning and purpose of that. But when you go back and look at these native ceremonies, we're pretty cut off from what the actual intention of it was, and I think some of it was pretty profound.
Yeah. Well, there is this sort of tradition of the earth. Well, in alchemy, of course, the earth is the great mother, the earth and the water. So there's a femininity to all that, and you have these caves, which are like wombs. They're like chambers of transformation or chambers of rebirth. And you'll even see like a lot of caves which are actually where the entrance is actually shaped like the entrance to a womb. And so these were actually used for transformational ceremonies, and I think probably coming of age ceremonies as well. And the closest I've experienced to anything like that was Temazcal. Have you done one of those before? So, it's like
just once.
Yeah, they make sort of a womb-like structure, like a dome, quite low in height. The one I was in, so it was like a crawl space essentially. And there's a pit inside, and they've got these big rocks on a fire outside, which they're heating these rocks until they're like red hot. And then they bring the rocks in, and then they close the dome, and you're all sort of huddled in there. And the shaman's got his drum, and he's banging the drum and like chanting and throwing water and oils and stuff on the rocks, which is making it really steamy and really hot. And it goes up 4 levels. So you're in there for about an hour, and each time it gets like more intense. The heat gets higher, the rhythm gets faster, the chanting gets higher, and it's intense. And you're just in there praying, and then you sort of crawl out at the end of it as if coming out the womb, reborn, and you get the cold water like poured over you when you come out and stuff. And so I think that kind of thing is like a ceremonial sort of rebirth, and you can do similar things with obviously caves and stuff like that, going in the earth, or even having someone go out into the woods for the night. Someone recently told me they did that with their son. They got him to go out in the woods for like a whole night and just spend one night in the woods by himself. And when he came back, he got gifted a knife, like a proper like knife, a bush knife,
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
think
Cool.
that's what I was going to say before. I think that's, I don't know who I heard speaking about this, but there are traditional cultures that was kind of like the ceremony, so to speak, like the rite of passage for the boy. Like when the boy becomes a man, that's what they would literally like, take them out in the woods. Like, you spend a night out there. I think the thing I was listening to was they actually leave them by themselves. And if they
yeah.
survive the night, then like they're a man.
And if you don't, if you survive the night, you're a man. If you don't, you're dead.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. But for like the girls and like the women, I'm not so sure. I know obviously for a woman, like for a girl, it's like getting her period for the first time is sort of like that initiation. But I think it's how they are then taken in by the women, by the older women, and they learn from them. And so I don't know. I haven't really looked much into the rituals, like more traditional tribal rituals around that. But in terms of the elements, because you did just mention some of that again, I'd love for you to speak to that a little more and like the importance of the elements and now what we're learning now about, or more about now, like the fifth element of ether and how it sort of connects them all and connects us to sort of everything else.
Yeah, sure. Well, we start with the four elements. I mean, there's five when you include the ether, but we start with the four because they're more accessible and we can sort of see them and feel them. Now, you got the three: air, water, and earth. These would be like the three material elements, whereas fire is immaterial, right? Fire is vibration. It's movement. It's light. We tend to think, we hear fire, we think of maybe a campfire or flames. But it's not just flames, it's actually all forms of vibration, right? Sound, light, radio waves, your heartbeat, heat, like all these things are all different forms of fire. So fire is the agent of transformation. So when you apply fire to material, whether it's air, water, or earth, like solid, liquid, or gas, when you apply fire to it, it initiates a transformative process. So usually things will become purified. So that's one of the first things. Fire purifies. So you can use fire to break things down, to cook things, to take something uncooked and to make it edible, let's say. Fire is really the agent that transforms matter from one state into another. And alchemists were known as masters of fire, because they were able to have such precise control over the fire element that they could, change materials from one state into another and actually design materials with specific properties for whatever they needed. And this is where we have like all the different kinds of metals, for example, right? They're like, in alchemy, there's actually only 7 metals. You have lead, tin, copper, iron, mercury, silver, and gold. Those are the 7 like root metals, and all the other metals are essentially like mixtures of the properties of those 7 core metals. So alchemists were able to look at materials and get a sense of what their properties are, and then kind of extract those properties and combine them into new materials which have the exact properties that they want. So take, for example, something like nickel. So nickel is just like iron, but it's got a silvery shine to it, which iron doesn't have, and it doesn't decay, it doesn't corrupt, it doesn't rust. So it's like iron in terms of its strength and its weight and everything, but it has this silveriness and this incorruptibility. Well, the silveriness comes from silver, and the incorruptibility comes from gold. So nickel is actually like a combination of mostly iron with a little bit of silver for the silveriness and a little bit of gold to make it incorruptible over time. So all the metals are like that. They've got properties of the 7 root metals combined together. And I think that's fascinating, because in modern science we're shown the periodic table, and we're taught that you can't turn one type of metal into another type of metal because they all have a specific type of atom, and it takes too much energy to change one atom into another atom and all this kind of stuff. But actually making metals is a lot like making soup. Right? You just melt it down and mix your ingredients together, and get the soup that you want from it. So yeah. Anyway, I don't know if that answered your question, but
well, with the four elements, so when you say fire's like immaterial, wouldn't you? I would have thought air is as well, because I know I sort of know about the four elements in the context of astrology, and that's kind of when you look at in terms of like characteristics in people, you tend to see like it goes earth are the most grounded, water are pretty grounded, air and fire are like up here. A lot of the times off with the fairies, I head up in the clouds kind of vibes. So I've always looked at it that way, whereas like air and fire are more of the more of the immaterial kind of things, but you kind of categorize air with water and earth. So can you speak to that a little more?
No, you're totally correct. Air is, it's obviously airy. I mean, I think of it like air is the sort of space for the mind, right? The space where you can visualize and think and all this kind of stuff. That would be like your air, but then the fire would be the actual like projector, that projects the images like into the air. But yes, I mean, it's not completely immaterial because you can compress air into like tanks and stuff like that, and it does actually have like limits of how far you can compress it. And of course, if you cool it down, you can turn it into a liquid, through condensation. So it does have a material component. It's not just pure vibration, but it's obviously it's dry. It's open. It's airy, right? Air is like an open space where communication and ideas and all that can be exchanged. But water and earth, would be the real material elements, as distinguished by the fact you can hold them in your hand. So, they have a weight to them, like you can actually like hold them and work with them. But air, I mean, you can try, you can do that with your hands, right? But you're not actually holding it, right? It's just kind of, you're in the air. So fire and air are the masculine elements. So they're above us, generally above and around us. And water and earth, the feminine elements, they're generally beneath us. They sort of support us from underneath. And air and fire have a tendency to move up, whereas water and earth have a tendency to move down. And, this is a really important thing to understand when people are talking about gravity and so on, because, we're taught about this theory of gravity. Everything is pulled by gravity down. But when you look at alchemy, you realize, well, half the universe goes up, right? Air and fire go up. Water and earth come down. So like there's two vectors. There's an upward vector and a downward vector simultaneously. And as we know, like if you want to defy gravity, all you need is a hot air balloon, right? It's just fire and air. That's all you need to go up. So gravity is what I would call the tendency of earth and water to return to itself. So Aristotle said each of the elements will always seek to return back to their source. So because the fire is all up in the sky, fire will go up. Air is the sky, so air will go up. Water is down below, so water will fall down. And the earth is below, so earth will fall down. It's just like the elements seeking to return back to their home, if you like, to their proper place.
Yeah, I love that.
Where does oil and alcohol fit into this?
Yeah, well, so alcohol is spirit. So alcohol, I guess, is kind of a modern word, but the alchemists would just call it spirit. And, we can think of spirit in this context as something which can be both liquid or gas. So alcohol is obviously volatile. If you leave the top off the bottle, then it's all just going to go back to the air. So again, talking about things returning to where they're from, like the spirit in the alcohol will return to the air. And we have a body and a spirit. And so with alcohol, because alcohol is just a spirit, it doesn't have a body. And this is quite interesting. So you can't turn alcohol into a salt. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't, like if you have some pure alcohol, you can't make it into a salt, right? Because salt is a physical body, and alcohol is a spirit. And spirit doesn't have a body, you see. But when when it's in material form, then it has both. It's like when it's say like sugar, right? So you have sugar, it has the salt and the alcohol in it, but when it breaks down, the spirit escapes, and the CO2 gets out or whatever. So so you have spirit, and these are like the spirits of plants. You start with, like with whiskey, you start with something like barley, which is matter, and then through breaking it down and running it through these different processes with the distillation and stuff, you extract the spirit from the matter, and then you purify and potentize the spirit. So when it's sat in the barrels for like 12 years or 50 years or however long they leave it, that's kind of potentizing the spirit. So the spirit's like taking on the qualities from the barrel, it's taking on qualities of the time and place that it's in. There's a whole ritual around drinking as well. We're supposed to drink, we have this thing of the toast. Do you know the reason for the toast? Why we call it a toast?
No.
It's quite interesting. I just learned about this recently. So the reason it's called a toast is because they used to put burnt toast in the bottom of the wine glasses to absorb the impurities from the wine. Because, as you probably know, carbon or burnt toast is an excellent absorber of impurities. So they would put burnt toast in the wine glasses, and then when you then do a toast, you would clink the glasses together. So that clink is actually a pure tone. If you're using a proper crystal glass or whatever, like you clink it and it makes a pure tone, like bing, like a church bell, but higher in frequency. So this would structure and purify the wine as well, sort of like reset the structure of the wine with the clink. And then you would all, in ceremonial fashion, you would then say who the toast is to, which would be like the celebrated guest or whatever, the person of honor who the toast is to. You then say their name to them, and then that's sort of synchronize it. Everyone's drink then becomes infused with that spirit.
Wow, that's so
they would say
interesting.
that, some people will drink and have a great time, some people will drink and have a bad time, but it's not because of the drink, it's because of the drinker, right? It's the spirit that you bring to the drink that it affects it. So if you're just depressed and you're sitting, knocking back drinks while, saying "fuck my life" over and over again, in your head, right? Then you're messing yourself up. But if you're around good people and you're celebrating, you're drinking properly, you purify the wine and do a proper toast, then it's more ceremonial and you get a better result. And this is the thing. I mean, when I'm in good company, in a celebrity environment with good company, I can drink all day, right? But I couldn't just sit and drink all day at home. Like, it's not it doesn't affect me the same way, So
Same.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. And as a bartender in my previous life, I can certainly say that it's really about the person. Like, you'd always get those people that once they were drunk, they were just such a pain in the ass. And then you'd always get those people that were just nice and jolly and always happy. And very interesting. And I can definitely relate, just, as you were giving those examples, like just for myself, from my what feels like my former life was I would drink like any excuse to drink, and then that's what I would find. Like, I would drink alone if I was sad, if I was happy, and out I'd be drinking and being social. And the experiences I had like drinking alcohol were very varied, and it's definitely how, like, what you're bringing to that experience, I think, that makes it that way. But something you were just speaking to, as you were talking about sort of the create, like how alcohol is actually made and created, Do you think that in like, the mass production of alcohol, because as we know, we've had people on this podcast who talk about, and it's quite often talked about more in like spiritual spaces, how not just alcohol, many substances, but alcohol, because it is known as a spirit, that it also has the potential to, especially if you're like blacking out and dissociating, actually it allows opportunities for spirits and entities to sort of come in and either inhabit you or just sort of latch onto you. And I kind of have this theory that, like with many things, that there's almost like this element of like black magic that goes on in the production of certain things, whether it be in the medical field or, in terms of alcohol. Because just when you were talking about the processes and all of the different elements that it's sort of being infused with, what's your take on that in terms of like the spiritual side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that, people can get, blind drunk, as it were, and then appear to get sort of taken over by spirits or, joyriding spirits who just want to take you for a little spin for a while or something. Yeah, I mean, many years ago in my university days, there was a number of occasions, I think it happened about 3 or 4 times, where, I was just out, being a student, just knocking back the beers with everyone else, and then went home, went to bed, and then the next thing I knew, I was actually out in the street in the nude. I'd literally gotten up out of my bed and walked out of the house
no way.
and got locked out, yeah, and it only happened a few times, but it was always when I was like, blind drunk after, just drinking tons of beers like all night. And, so whether that was some spirit just trolling me and, lifting me out of bed and out into the street and just like locked outside, like banging on the door, wake up and let me in. That happened
Mine
a few
is,
times, yeah.
I think the spirit that inhabits me if I go blind drunk is Batman. Because I literally have climbed rain gutters, like trying to get onto the building for no reason that I can discern.
Yeah.
Except I wanted to go up top and, I don't know, maybe fight crime.
I love that term you use, Steve, like spirits just kind of joyriding, because that's what I think. Some of them I don't think are like, super... the word's escaping me. Like, I don't think that not all of them are super malicious. I think that some are just kind of wanting to go and have a bit of fun, and then you just do these really stupid things that you would never normally do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's definitely a loss of judgment and everything that comes from it. And, like I say, with like drinking drugs, it's not the substance so much that's the problem. It's the abuse, right? It's the abuse of that substance. It's like doing it too much, doing it in the wrong way, in the wrong setting, or, overusing it and stuff. But no, I mean, nowadays I like whiskey, and, I didn't used to drink whiskey back in those days. I would just drink beer like everyone else. But now I drink whiskey, and it's much more slow. It's a much more slow process. You're not like guzzling back like pint after pint. It's like little sips, and it's just I feel warm and fuzzy and good, and never been like blind drunk from like whiskey and stuff. So because the thing is like so beer and wine have more impurities in them than things like whiskey and vodka and stuff like that. So they have, so you're likely to get worse of a hangover, because your body's producing, processing all these like toxins and stuff like that in your blood. But, whiskey is a very fine art, a very high art in Scotland here. There's distilleries all over the country, and, they do proper alchemy in there, and, they take it very seriously. And, people all over the world are whiskey entrepreneurs. But yeah, I agree that it could also go the other way, where you have drinks that are being manufactured and they're actually putting negative intent into it. I mean, look at things like the Monster energy drinks and like Alco Pops and Blue Wicked and all this kind of stuff, right? It's like Liquid Death is one that's like water that says Liquid Death on it.
Really?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So that's
I actually heard that the Texas Eclipse Festival a few years ago, or it might have been last year or the year before. That was the only water available at the festival, was Liquid Death.
No way.
And it came in cans, right? So you can't even put the lid You can't even put the lid back on it once you've opened it. So everyone's just walking around with their liquid death cans, like tripping and everything. I thought that is dark. Like for
Yeah.
them to like take over the whole water supply of a festival. That's the only thing you can drink is called liquid death. Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't there.
Yeah, it's actually kind of creepy. Like, especially, it's so inverted, right? Like, I mean, who knows now? They say 70% water, in more of the newer research with water and the fourth phase of water, we're probably looking at more like 90%. I've heard people say even 99%, we're 99% water. But it's literally the opposite. Like, water is life. Like, to be drinking something like water called liquid death, that's, something super nefarious going on there, I think.
Yeah, and of course, what we've learned through the work of people like Dr. Emoto and Veda Austin is that water is impressionable. It takes on the character and quality of the intentions that you put into it, be those words or feelings or whatever it is. And, and actually what I meant to say earlier is alcohol is even more sensitive than water. This is the thing to realize. It's the volatility, you see. So water is, slightly volatile, right? It does sort of, some of it rises up into steam or whatever. But alcohol is even more volatile, and it's that volatility that makes it impressionable to intentions and that kind of stuff. So that's why it's like it's even more important to bless your alcohol than it is to bless your water, because it's even more sensitive to the energy in the room.
Yeah, and the way that it permeates the body, like faster, through, getting you drunk, the blood-brain barrier and all that, and the way it literally affects your vibration, your frequency. You can feel it. They call it buzzing. When you're going. Yeah. So how does that differ from oil? Because I'm just curious about that. Yeah.
Well, of course, there's many different types of oil, but in alchemy we have there's three principles: body, soul, and spirit. And it said that every living thing has a body, soul, and spirit. And these, the body, the soul, and the spirit correspond with three parts of something, which is obviously the body is like the physical, the salt, as they call it, the physical material. The soul is the oil. So the soul corresponds with oil, and then the spirit corresponds with spirit or alcohol. So you have these three sort of essences, material essences of every living thing. So take a plant, for example. A plant can be reduced to a salt. So you can pick the leaves or the flowers or whatever, you can dry them out, and then you can get a mortar and pestle and crunch it all up and make it into a fine salt. So there you've got your salt. But you can also make an oil by taking that same plant material and boiling it in water, boiling it down, and extracting the essences. So the oil is non-dissolvable essences. So the oil is the components of the plant that can't be dissolved in water. Mm-hmm. As you know, oil and water doesn't mix, right? So oil is basically everything that the water can't clean away, and that would be called the soul of the plant. And then the spirit, well, that's what you get through, as we talked about, like brewing. So you're fermenting it and distilling it to purify the spirit. So any living thing can be reduced into its salt, soul, and spirit, or body, soul, and spirit, salt, sulfur, and mercury. And now if you're talking about crude oil, well, I think that is essentially, so oil is the heaviest component of the plant as well. So I think what happens as things on the surface decay and go down, I think the oil goes down, right? And then it gathers in pockets under the ground. And so it is this sort of regenerative cycle where, everything that's sort of dying in the natural world, it will reduce to oil and salt. The salt will go back to the soil. The oil will gather together into, oily deposits, and the spirit will go up to the sky, essentially. So oil is, it's fundamental in alchemy for sure.
Yeah. So you could almost say, because I've always wondered, like, what is crude oil, but it's almost like the soul of the earth. a collective soul.
Yeah, it's like we consider like how much they're able to get out of crude oil, like how many different substances can be made from it. I mean, you've obviously got all your pharmaceuticals, but then all your like plastics and different types of fuel and yeah, just loads of things. I think there's like maybe 8 different fractions or maybe more that they separate it into, and then within those there's like other fractions, and they can you can just make so much. So it's like almost all the soul essences of all the different plants and animals, like all like gathered together, coagulated together into this black residue, which is full of potential. It can be sort of made into almost anything.
Yeah. And can you speak now to ether? Because I actually think this was the first time I've seen it, was at the end of your presentation at the festival, was the symbol for ether is the symbols for all four, the 4 other elements, sorry. The symbols for those put together is the symbol for ether. And so how does ether connect everything? And what's your understanding of how we interact with ether and how we are able to connect with others in the world around us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as I said, air and fire are upward vectors, and so they have upward triangles like this as representing them, and then the earth and water have downward triangles because they go down like a downward vector. And when you add the 2 triangles together, you get the 6-pointed star, otherwise known as the Star of David. But actually, of course, a lot of people will be familiar with that now from all the Israel stuff. But actually, the symbol is way, way older than Israel and way, way older than Zionism. It's actually been appropriated by that movement. But you can see, looking back, that it's a scientific symbol for the ether going way, way back, like as far as Aristotle or even beyond, I would say. So, yeah, so that's, you have your symbol for ether, and there may be other symbols for ether as well. But the idea is that all the elements come from ether, and everything is taking place within the ether. So modern science tells us that space is empty. Well, it's got atoms in it, but between the atoms is empty space, just complete void, nothingness, a vacuum. But the ether theory says no, actually space is filled. It's filled. It's like the difference between glass half empty and glass half full, right? Like modern science says the universe is half empty, and ether is like half full or whatever. There's a difference between the two, but it's quite an important difference because when space is empty, there's actually no scientific basis for spirituality. So if we're all just material balls of atoms, just bumbling around, then there's no actual medium for anything spiritual to take place because there's just this emptiness and nothingness in between the material. But with ether, it's said to be a very thin fluid. So kind of like the fish in water that doesn't know it's in water. Well, we're in the ether, but we don't know we're in the ether because it's so thin, it moves through us. It penetrates everything. So unlike air, say, which when we move through the air moves around us, right? The air like goes around our body, like around the airplane. But the ether will go right through us, and so it penetrates everything. But the rate at which it can penetrate things depends on the density. So if you take something like lead, the heaviest, the most dense of all materials, the ether will go through lead slowly, right? But if you take something like a human being or something lighter like wood or whatever, the ether will go through it much more quickly, right? So you do get this like drag effect with it. And there's actually been some experiments done where they were able to create rain by using a pipe, a long pipe with a bit of lead in the end attached to a helicopter, and the helicopter will just fly towards the east, so in the direction of the oncoming ether wind with these lead tubes, and it would create rain because it was slowing down the ether going through the lead, and it would create this like kind of condensation effect. And that was one of the ways they were able to engineer like rain.
Wow.
So yeah, so ether was known about, and it was accepted, and it was, until about 100 years ago or 120 years ago, with the start of the whole Einstein movement in physics. Then there was a big effort to chuck out ether from science altogether, and Einstein was a big part of this, and a lot of the quantum physics movement of the last century was really predicated on this basis of the ether does not exist anymore. We now have a new science that's superior, this quantum science or whatever. So yeah, ether is I would say is the scientific link, or it's the missing link between science and spirituality. And that's why it's kicked out of science, because science is a materialistic philosophy. It does not believe in spirit, does not believe in God, and so they've thrown out ether, because that is kind of your sort of route into understanding that stuff.
Yeah, that kind of explains. I don't fully understand this, because the first time I heard it was through the lens of human design, because with human design, it's like your unique energetic blueprint, and the way that they kind of explain it scientifically is that there's all these neutrinos that are like, I don't even know exactly how they explain it, because that's a scientific thing, right? Why don't I let the scientists explain what neutrinos are?
Neutrinos, they're even more they're even more elusive and insignificant than electrons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, it's like if someone explains something to you in terms of neutrinos, they're really, scraping the bottom of the barrel as far as explanations go. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't really use that term. Like, I don't use that explanation of it when I explain what human design is to people, but I've heard that explained. It's like there's like all these neutrinos that are like flying around. They're carrying all this information. And when you're born, it's like a snapshot of like all the neutrinos that were in existence at that time with all this information. So I'm like, it's one way to explain it, but it never really made that much sense to me. So I don't use it. But your explanation of ether makes a lot more sense to me. And I guess it kind of speaks more to energy and like the energetic sort of capacity and interaction of things.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's light, really. Light, or alchemy would be called fire, the fire element, that contains all the information. You think about it, even just in this exchange that we're having now, all the information is being communicated in light waves, at light speed, essentially, between us. I mean, you're like 10,000 miles away from me. I know we don't have a great connection at the moment, but when I was in Australia, I was on Byron Bay with my phone, talking to my family 10,000 miles away on 5G, and it was high-def, instant communication. I thought, this is, just unbelievable, actually.
Unreal,
like on the beach with my feet in the water and everything, just like 10,000 miles away talking to my family. No wires, right? It's like, so the information is encoded in the light. And, the neutrino theory would just be, I guess, another way of trying to explain where the information is or where it's stored. But I would say it's in the light waves. And then the water is able to reflect that. So when the light shines on the water, the water then structures itself according to the information that's coming from the light. So we're emitting light to each other, and then we're receiving that light, which is then going in and structuring the waters of our body, which then gives us, the memory of the experience, let's say.
Yeah, this is it's so fascinating. And as you're talking about this, I was thinking, you brought up your family, and I was thinking about like containers, right? There's different containers in relationships, and it's almost like, what do they call that? Like a chalice, but also a crucible, and that's a part of alchemy. And the crucible, I'm not sure what direction I want to go with this, whether it's towards the family and like the different elements of that, and like the nuclear family, and how in the 50s or whatever they started splitting the atom and or earlier than that, but the atom of the family, like the nuclear family, and that was the A bomb. But the other things about alchemy that go into the philosophy of it are also very useful, even when you're not just with beakers and all that stuff. And ever since I heard about alchemy for the first time as a philosophy, as like an alchemical wedding and the different elements of breaking something down, separating it, reconstituting it at a higher form, my mind was like military. Like the military process, boot camp, is an alchemical process, and I believe the designers of it intentionally, like, absolutely knew that. In fact, in the Marine Corps, they're at the end of their boot camp, they have an exercise where they bring everything together, and it's literally like a very big challenge, and they call that challenge a crucible. So what about this philosophical element of the crucible as part of transformation do you want to speak to?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Well, that's it. I mean, the military training is a transformational process, right? I mean, they're taking you in as essentially you're led, right? When you come in off the street or whatever, sign up to the military, you're basically a leaden person, and they want to turn you into a soldier, a warrior, and you know that's going to involve calcination, which will be like the breaking down of your ego. Right, probably one of the first things that happens when you get in is they'll start to break down your ego, you know, more and more until you're sort of broken down to the black ash of your of your innermost, like, just essence. That's all that's left, and then they start to like then build you up again into what they want to create. So, yeah, I can quite imagine that that's all alchemical processes in there. And sorry, what was the second part of your question there?
The crucible.
The crucible.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Explain
Sorry,
to me
for the
crucible.
can we just for the dummies? Can we just do like crucible definition 101? Because I don't even like fully know what that is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's actually just, you know, you have loads of them in your kitchen. You know, I mean, any kind of like pots and pans would be
Just something that
crucibles
holds something else.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's
essentially-
designed
yeah,
to hold heat as well, right?
Oh
Or
right.
to be
Yeah, it's
put
a
over heat.
container that hold a container of transformation, which is able
Yeah.
to you know, take a lot of heat. So essentially, because like you think your pots and pans, right? So there's a lot of heat comes in the bottom where it's actually touching the fire or touching the heating element. But then then the job is to then sort of smooth that out and make that fire less burny, but still translate the heat into the inside of the crucible. So, you know, for like melting metals, let's say. But as I say, I mean, it's basically just a pot or a pan when you get down to a vessel for transformation. And we ourselves are vessels. So you talk about containers, you know, we're not solid objects. We are actually containers. We have a huge amount of space inside of us. And, you know, that is how that's how we end up taking on like so many like impurities and toxins and, you know, things that we don't want inside of us, right? Because we actually have a lot of space in there and we're constantly digesting the outside world, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, or physically. And sometimes things get in there and they get stuck. And so, you know, alchemical healing fundamentally is about purification. And this is where where it differs from modern is in medicine. Because in medicine now, first thing they'll do is start injecting foreign substances into your body, right? Or give you some drugs or inject you with something or cut you open. But in alchemy, the first thing to do would be to like purify the body, right? To actually get out the things that are causing the disease or the imbalance. You know, so there's a whole different approach to healing in alchemy versus modern medicine as well.
Love that.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many things you've said tonight for us, sorry, but there's so many things you've said now, Steve, that, yeah, I'm definitely, like, kind of getting lost in thought a little bit. My mind's actually reeling a little bit, but yeah, it's so fascinating. That's why I just love, your book is on my very long list now of books to buy on Amazon. I've actually created a wish list on Amazon because there's so many. And I love that you said that you kind of wrote it in a way that it is like an alchemical process going through it. So like, how did you write it in that way? Was it with that intent when you started, or did it just sort of unfold that way?
Yeah, well, no, I used this process like what we just talked about with the military. So the idea that the what they call the negredo and the albedo, which is the negredo is this like breaking down of your ego and all the false things in your mind, all the false things that you cling to. And then the albedo is then like filling you back up with light again. But so it's like this kind of darkness and light. So I structured it that way. So the first half was to be like breaking down all of this stuff, all these beliefs and assumptions that we hold, and all of us have it because it's part of the universal education system we're all subjected to. So I wanted to start by breaking down that, and so there's a lot of like difficult conversations in the first half of the book, right? And probably a lot of people chuck it out before even getting to the second half. But I wanted to make the second half like the reward for getting through the first half. If you can handle having all your beliefs like, hacked away at in the first half, then you'll be filled up with all this new knowledge in the second half that's actually, important knowledge that will serve you for the rest of your life, So that's the way I structured it. And I was kind of going to do it in 7 steps as well. So there's this, 7 processes. And there's a bit of that in it as well. The 7 processes are kind of in there, but mainly it was just the 2, like the negredo, the first half, and the albedo, the second half. And then what they call the rubedo, which is like the integration of all your new knowledge. Well, that's what you do after you read the book, right? So you got the first 2 stages in the book, and then the third stage is when you go and start the work and integrate the knowledge into yourself.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that's why this is such, like, I think we said it on a previous episode. I don't know if it was Mark Gobers. We've said it a few times actually where, this is the stuff that I feel like we'll be teaching our kids. Like this will be like the foundational stuff, because I think, even when you're speaking to the elements, like there's so many things that the elements correspond to that, like, once you understand them on a fundamental level, you can understand so many other things with more ease without like, I have to know this. It's like, well, that's corresponds to this, and then so this is the characteristics of this particular element, and it just applies to so many things. But I do want to ask you, because you do have obviously like a PhD and this scientific background, I'm curious for you, like, what were your sort of spiritual beliefs before, well, maybe like growing up, and like how did going through, a university degree and this, like, going through learning the sciences, like, did that shift and change your spiritual beliefs in any way?
Yes, I mean, I was raised, there was a little bit of Christian influence. We had a priest who would come to the school once a week and read some stories and that from the Bible, but not much. And then there was no religious influence at all in secondary school or in university, of course. And my parents are not religious either, so but there was always an interest in the supernatural, and I had family friends who were psychic mediums, for example, and they would go around like helping people with spiritual problems like ghosts and stuff like that. And so from a young age I was exposed to that kind of stuff, and it always super fascinated me. As I got through my education, which I assumed was teaching me how the world works, of course, I started to notice that everyone in science is completely opposed to any ideas of God or spirit or ghosts or supernatural, psychic stuff. Anything basically outside of the materialist scientific paradigm is basically cast out as, woo-woo, discredited nonsense and stuff. And I was a bit uncomfortable with that, but anyway, I got through it. And but my interest in, the supernatural just really continued. It never went away, and it wasn't until like a few years after I finished my PhD and I did some ayahuasca in a shamanic ceremony and just really went into that spirit world. It's just undeniable, like just the this other this other world beyond the body is beautiful and it's full of light, and so that really brought me back. That gave me the confidence that I wasn't mad for being into this stuff, that there is objectively a spiritual realm and it can be accessed through plant medicines or meditation or prayer and things like this. And I thought, I need to look into this, but with a scientific, look at it with a scientific lens, as it were, rather than just dismissing it, which is what most scientists would do. And then this basically led me to alchemy. I because I knew that my scientific training couldn't explain the spirit world like at all. I was like racking my brain trying to come up with explanations for what was happening in these shamanic ceremonies. Nothing made sense. But then I started looking at alchemy. I realized fire, earth, air, and water are like fundamental, and they're spiritual qualities as well as material. And then it all started to sort of come together. Like the shamanic ceremonies are very much an alchemical process. You know, like talk about the negredo and the albedo, right? I mean, they usually, because they run through the night, right? So you have, you know, you might take a drink at like 11, 12 o'clock at night, and then the medicine is running all through the night until dawn. So that nighttime period, that's your negredo, right? That's when everything is breaking down. You're like losing your mind. You don't know what's going on. It's like, it can be confusing. It can be beautiful. It's just, you're like kind of up and down. But then when the sun comes up in the morning, that's your albedo. The light of the sun comes back, and, you know, people obviously experience profound healings in those moments. You know, there's like tears, and, you know, just so much happens when the sun comes up. So there's two sort of distinct stages to the shamanic, the nighttime and then the day after. So yeah, and you know, so even though if they didn't know about alchemy, even if they weren't trained in it, it's like that the alchemy is inherent in that process. And yeah, it was powerful. So yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah, I'm always curious to ask people, especially that have been through like some sort of science degree. Because that, like for me, I, you know, went through a lot of my life not really even knowing what God was, and was very lost for a lot of my life. And then I sort of came to, I sort of in my early 20s went more into like more new age spirituality, but it did sort of open me up to connecting to source, like, you know, the divine. But then when I started studying, I didn't start studying until like, I was 25 when I started my holistic nutrition degree. And so, you know, you do all the base subjects, so like chemistry and biochemistry and biology and all of this. And I just remember going through it with a little bit of skepticism, because I used to always think, like at the cellular level, I used to always think, how do they really know that? How do they really know that's the structure of a cell? Like, how do they actually know these things? But I just, that was like, I feel like a really pivotal moment for me, because I really started to look at like just the human body and how we're created. You know, even in the scientific model, I'm like, who else could create us so perfectly? And I feel like that really was like one of the early stepping stones for me that really did bring me much closer to God. And I know I've heard other people speak about like being atheist and like very scientific, but then there were things within science that also kind of led them to ask more questions, which led them back to more of this spiritual way of being and seeing things. And so, yeah, I'm always curious, like, yeah, how it influences people in that sense, because I love how you speak about things, that there is like this spirit to pretty much everything, not just us, but in plants, and everything living has a spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, I didn't really talk about God. Even, you know, for a long time I was interested in the supernatural and in spirituality, but, you know, still without God in the picture, if you know what I mean. Just looking at spirituality, you know, in a sort of general way. And I mean, with the New Age, I was into that as well. And, you know, there's a lot of criticisms of it, but at the same time, it was a stepping stone for a lot of people, right? It was like a stepping stone out of that materialist view into something more spiritual, and then from there to something perhaps more satisfying and enduring. And you know, so I mean, I started reading like religious books, you know, like in my late 30s, like about 40 years old, started reading the Bible. I mean, I still haven't read it cover to cover, but you know, I've read a lot of the books within it, and you know, I can take it. I mean, I love it. I think it's full of wisdom, and you know, I love the story of Jesus, and I do actually more and more believe in Jesus. There's a great power that we all need to understand. I don't go to church. I don't believe in the way the church teaches religion. Certainly not here. I mean, I'm sure there are some good churches around the place, but I don't have I don't have that option here. But I'm drawn to more towards the Gnostic view. So you know, because there's like the faith, and there's the gnosis, and they're kind of different, right? So like the mainstream idea in the church is that all you need to do is believe that Jesus died on the cross for your sins,
Yeah.
Basically, that's it. That's all you need. Just believe that he died on the cross for your sins, and then you'll go to heaven. And I just don't think that's. I think that's a psyop. I don't think that's a legitimate way to approach religion. I think Jesus taught us many great things, and you can go and read them in the Bible, the red letters in the Bible, the stuff that Jesus said, and they're beautiful teachings that transcend time, and that they're useful, I'd say, for everybody. But the faith is not so much about learning Jesus's teachings. The faith is like, you just believe that he died on the cross for your sins, and then you'll get to heaven. And I don't think that's. I think that's like a psyop or whatever. So
yeah.
I think
I'm
there's
totally
wisdom
with you on
there.
that.
Yeah. There's wisdom there, and it's very much worth looking at the Bible, because it's like the first book, in English, basically. So everything references back to that. Like, everything relates to it. When you start looking at the Bible, I'm like, oh, that's where that came from. Oh, that's where this came from. Oh, that's what that means. It's like all the symbolism all like points back to that. So I couldn't call myself a scholar without reading the Bible. I was just like, how could you? It's like it's got to be read. So yeah, I talk about wisdom because I think that's what I got from reading the Bible, is that God wants us to seek wisdom. God's wisdom is in everything. It's in the design of every plant, the design of every human being, the whole nature. It's like teeming with wisdom. But if you're not looking for it, and if you're not doing the self work, then you're not going to see it. But once you start to see the wisdom, you have the gnosis, right? So you don't have to have the faith because you have the knowledge. So this is what Carl Jung, when he was asked, do you believe in God? He was like, no. He's like, I know. I don't believe. I know, right? It's because he had the gnosis. Right? He done the work, and so I'm more on the Gnostic side of Christianity than on the churchy side of it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think there is a there. That's what like Crow 777. I learned a lot of this stuff listening to him and there are various guests I have on, and that radio show, it's really good. It's got a lot of information on alchemy. But I think it's the tagline for the show is "Belief is the enemy of knowing," and yeah, that makes sense because I have the same experience. I know there's a God. Like, I know God, not everything about God, but I know, and I experience that, and there is power in that. And that's what I think we're designed for, but we're designed to find that out through a process. And that process, I believe, how about I use the word know? I know that process is alchemical. And that makes sense as to why this stuff has been hidden, why they had to encode it, because for a long time it's been kept secret, to the point that the people that knew this stuff, for some reason, felt they had to encode it and hide it, but felt it was important enough to preserve it. And there's a part of it where it's not even, you don't even need to decode the books and decode the cathedrals. For people who don't know, there's several cathedrals. There's one in Scotland, I believe, that's quite famous, that's encoded alchemy.
Roslyn Chapel.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
But some of this stuff can just come through your experience in life and through observation and doing and being.
Well, I think that's like what we're steered so much away from, is this knowing of God. You know what I mean? Because even through religion, it's like, well, you don't know God. You only know God through our church or our, whatever insert religion here. And yeah, I think that's very much done on purpose. And I think the more it's such a fine line. Like, I'm really like at this point in my life now where, yeah, it's like we want to seek knowledge, and that's great. But I think in the pursuit of that, I think a lot of people tend to like then intellectualize everything. And then again, I feel like that takes us away from this divine connection that we have, because I think that's the source of all knowledge, you know? And I think when we are able to kind of step out of this always seeking, and I think we're so accustomed to that in this modern world with just, you know, smartphones in our hands and, you know, the internet and just everything's at the tip of our fingers. I think when we really step out of that and we do connect to that divine intelligence, I think that's where that true knowing comes from.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. You know, I was there's two famous alchemists that I look into a lot. One of them is Paracelsus, you might have heard of, and the other is Robert Fludd, who you may not have heard of because he got kind of like eliminated from history. But he was a great genius, and I actually have a book here with all his drawings and stuff, like massive book. So, and they were both physicians and both alchemists, and but they had different approaches to healing. So Paracelsus is kind of the pioneer of, you know, both pharmaceutical medicine and herbal medicine, because his whole thing was about, you know, making medicine from the earth. So he would take earthen substances, whether it's plant materials or metals or sometimes, you know, even toxic substances, and he would transmute them into medicines and, you know, administer, you know, different medicines for different diseases and so on. But Robert Fludd, his approach was completely different. He felt that the source of all healing was the sun, the light from the heavens, and he believed that you didn't need to administer any drugs, that it was all about channeling the light of the heavens, and he would use the name of Jesus Christ, the Hebrew name, actually, Yeshua. He would use incantations, invocations, he would use music and sound and all this. And he believed that the sacred name of Jesus Christ was the key to unlocking the power of the sun. And so, and that's how he would heal people, right? With no drugs, but just with like holy names and sound and music and stuff, right? And now it's controversial, right? Obviously, the medical establishment didn't like him. He got, you know, deleted from history and stuff. But, I mean, if you just go and look it up, how many cases of people being healed with the name Jesus Christ? It's literally countless. I mean, you know, I'm not just talking about all the cases in the Bible, all the cases of the apostles, all the cases throughout history, all the cases in the modern age, in the current age. I mean, it's literally countless. If you were to say, you know, what is a good way to heal people based solely on the evidence of people's reports, then actually the name of Jesus Christ is probably one of the most established ways to heal people. It's like, and has been for thousands of years, right? But it's so controversial, and it doesn't, the materialist paradigm hates it, and they don't want people knowing that. But just go and look it up. You'll find endless reports of people healing with the name of Jesus.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We often say that with even in terms of like, you know, demonic, these parasitic and demonic entities that attach to people. You know, whenever when people discuss like, oh, was Jesus a real man or not? And it's like, well, it's almost irrelevant because like whatever, there's some power to the entity of Jesus Christ or Yeshua. Like there's some power in the name because a lot of these, what do they call them? Like exorcisms use the name of Jesus Christ and it dispels these entities. So there's something to say for that for sure.
Not even just the exorcism, like the proper church version of that, but like I have a friend, Patrick, who he's been on the podcast. Actually, we need to key him in for an interview. But he used to be into heroin and then started seeing the green-eyed goblin things and having these weird experiences and had, you know, sleep paralysis, things like that. And, you know, an actual, what looked like to him a physical female demon thing holding him down. And by mentioning the name Jesus Christ, that thing freaked out and left, and like just it's like it physically just couldn't tolerate that frequency coming out of his mouth, those words. Yeah,
I've had a friend that had a similar experience. I've heard so many stories where saying the name of Jesus Christ gets rid of these things.
Yeah, and that's what it tells you in the Bible, that it will, the demons will flee from that word. And so so Robert Fludd kind of saw disease as that kind of a thing, not necessarily a demon in the body, but you know, an imbalance or something where your body is differing from the body of God, right? You've kind of gone out of the way a bit, and so. I mean, you think what that would mean for all the healing industries, like the medical, the healthcare, drugs, even like supplements, and even things like herbalism and all that. Like none of it would be necessary if everybody just healed with the name of Jesus, right? So it's highly, highly controversial. But as I say, if you look into it, you'll find countless examples of it working effectively.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. We could talk to you for hours, Steve. I'm sure you're such a wealth of knowledge. And I feel like even just this conversation, we're just like, is the tip of the iceberg. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. Thank you so much for your time. And please let everyone know where they can find your work, how they can keep in touch with you, where we can buy your book.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's been great chatting to you. And so my homepage is stephenyoung.uk, and that's Stephen with a V. You'll find all my links and things on there. I've got a YouTube and a Substack and a Telegram, and I've got a new Instagram channel I just started as well. And I've got a lot of content coming out in the near future. I'm sitting on a big pile of stuff that I've made, and I've got a lot to release in the coming weeks and months. So, including
awesome.
a new book actually. So,
amazing!
Yeah, it's not as big as this one. It's going to be probably about a third of the size. I wanted to make a shorter book, which focuses on alchemy specifically for health, wealth, and love. Like there's like the three biggest areas of human concern is our health, our wealth, and our relationships and love. So I've written a short book on alchemy, looking at those three areas in depth. So it'll be a good sort of primer for someone who maybe hasn't read this book. It'd be a good book for them to start with. But even if it is someone who has read this book, it's going to take a lot of the lessons from there and apply them to like three of the most important areas of human life. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. As well as I say, gathering together all the fruits of my labor from the last 20 years, which I'll be making available as a download as well. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of new stuff on the horizon.
Yeah, you got lots coming. I'm excited. I can't wait for that new book.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'm just in the final stages of it now, so I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to release it, but as soon as I can, I will.
Yeah, amazing. Well, we'll have all your links in the show notes for people to get in touch with you and, look deeper into your work. And I feel like we're going to have to get you on again sometime in the future, maybe after the next book's out. And, we can go deeper into some of these things because I really do feel like we just scratched the surface today.
Yeah. It's been awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Great to see you both again. And I hope I'll see you next year in Australia.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, you're always welcome back in this part of the world. And definitely looking forward to that music bundle when you get that set to release. I was actually working. I was in the zone the other day listening to it. And it puts my head in the right place. So thanks for that
stuff.
Does it put your head in flux?
Yes.
Probably not the first time you heard that. Hey, Steve, I'm not very original.
Actually, that's a good one. Yeah.
We'll define flux on the next episode of Natural AF with Stephen Young.
Thanks, Steve.
Right, brilliant. Thanks so much, guys. All the best.
Thanks for tuning in to the Natural AF podcast, where we explore holistic healing modalities, mindsets, and methods that reconnect us to nature and our natural state of being.
If something resonated, share this episode and see the show notes for our guest links, as well as all of our discount codes for our aligned affiliates and natural art form, where we handcraft a range of organic, natural remedies that help support your body's natural healing abilities and help support the show.
If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please take a few seconds to leave us a rating and review. And if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, hit the like button and drop us a comment, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for the latest updates.
We're not here to conform, we're here to remember what's real. So step into your power, be curious, and be natural AF.